Well, hello there. Welcome to another episode of the 4Q podcast. I am doing a bit something different today. I've just uploaded the episode of an episode I did with the beautiful Inside Out Kris, another podcast, which a lot of people messaged me about, really connected with, and so I thought I would share it here with you. I usually don't share other people's podcasts on my own because I feel like it's just a different format and I don't want to change something that could be relaxing for you here. But I feel like if there's some gems you can get out of our chat that we had together, it'd be brilliant. So we talked about two key things in this episode. There's 7 different kinds of burnout and what they look like and what they feel like, which again, I think I'm going to expand on in another episode. And the root causes of anxiety and depression, which I think many of you, if you've been following me for a long time, won't be surprised by my thoughts on this discussion. So without further ado, here's the episode I did with Inside Out Kris. Hey, I'm Sheena Shuey. I'm a registered social worker and host of the 4Q podcast. I'm passionate about normalizing, not pathologizing life, and that's not easy. So each episode, I have amazing guests on to share the messy, beautiful ups and downs of life in 4 key questions with tips and tricks along the way. There are moments in life where you can embrace your story and understand that it's okay not to feel okay sometimes. So let's get into it. This is the 4Q podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Out, episode number 53. Today's guest is the incredibly wise and beautiful mother, Sheena. She is host of the podcast, the 4Q podcast. She is a holistic social worker with a background in psychology. Sheena offers coaching, courses, counseling, and virtual retreats, which you can explore more on her website, which I have put in the show notes for you. In today's episode, we have broken it into a 2-part conversation. The first topic we delve into is the 7 types of different burnout and how that can look. Sheena explores the different ways we can break our overwhelm and better protect our energy while sharing what these different types of burnout do look like in your life. The second topic we explore is the root causes of anxiety and depression. Trigger warning in this episode, we obviously do discuss anxiety and depression. If you are someone that has had these experiences, please know this episode may not be for you. I have listed resources in the show notes of today's conversation if you are seeking support on your healing journey. Now, every week I send a Sunday evening email as a way to build more connection with my community in this space. I share my favorite recipe of the week, workouts, little love notes, and a very exciting project that I can't wait to share, but it will be totally free and it will be coming to your inbox really, really soon. I would love for you to join me here each week. If you haven't already, simply click the link in the show notes, pop in your email address, and some freebies will be coming your way. All right, without further ado, let's dive into today's episode with the beautiful Sheena.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I know that I was on yours last week and I am so excited to have you here on mine talking about some very important topics. So thank you for being here.
Not a worry at all. Love the podcast, love what you're doing, love how you keep it real with women. So it just seems like the perfect kind of, connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into these topics, can you share a little bit about you and your life and what that looks like right now for you?
Yeah. So, first of all, I am a business owner as well. So I own Shavasana Collective, which is a holistic psychology, social working, coaching practice. So I myself am a holistic social worker. So I've got a Bachelor of Psychology, a Master's of Counselling, and a Master's of Social Work. But the reality is I am a mum and I am a starting business owner. So I do work another job where I do counselling 3 days a week. I have a toddler. And what else? I have a fly out husband, which obviously has its own challenges. Being a mum, having a husband in and out. which is hopefully ending soon, which will be good. We've got some news coming up, so that's good. What else about me? Obviously, yeah, I'm just an advocate for all things mental health and understanding it from a holistic perspective. So I guess one of my big things is I really want, and the purpose of my own podcast, so I do have a podcast as well, and the 4Q podcast, and really I just want to normalize life rather than pathologize it. Like, it's very easy to put people into boxes and into labels, but we all go through shit. So let's just normalize that rather than trying to pathologize it or medicate it. Like, that's not kind of getting to the root issues of things. So, yeah.
I love all of that. And you sound like you're definitely being kept on your toes between your work and toddler and just really busy. And I can't imagine how hard, I think, fly in, fly out when you are a partner of someone who does that as their job. And, you essentially are signing up to be a solo parent most of the time. I can't relate to it completely because, as you know, my husband does. We have a couple of businesses here in Newcastle. But what I do know is that he does long hours. So he'll go 7 till 7 some days. And that does almost feel solo parenting sometimes. And there's a lot of women that are going through similar experiences, and having a business and doing your life's work and following your passions would just be so hard because there's that push and pull, the work-life, mum-life balance. You want your baby to be happy, but also you want to do what makes you happy. And yeah, I think it's really amazing that you're doing all of it and managing being, technically a solo mum some of the time.
Oh, well, thanks for the appreciation. I do get a lot of that, but I'm such a stickler for boundaries. I'm sure everyone who comes on your podcast is like, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. It's all everyone talks about, but I'm a stickler for it, and I'm very conscious of my time and my energy. So ever since becoming a mum and having way less energy and way less time, if somebody is a time suck or an energy suck, or if there's a project that if there's something in my life that sucks energy or time out of me and does not serve me, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing it, whereas in the past I'd be like such a people pleaser and like, how can I make this work? How can I fit more in? And it's like, no, I want to slow down. And, I do have a day where my son's in daycare. I don't have work. And yes, I work on business stuff. But if I just want to watch a movie, if I just want to sit and do nothing, I've learned how to be okay with rest. And I think that is what keeps me grounded and keeps me going through, because I think so many of us are so uncomfortable with rest. Like, the second we sit down as mothers, we're like, oh my gosh, I've got to clean this, I've got to organize this, I've got to do this. And like, the checklist, the to-do list is there. And that to-do list is always going to be there. So it's kind of like, I'm either going to force myself to learn how to be okay with rest, or I'm just going to keep going and going and going with this to-do list that will never be done. So, yeah.
You touched on that there, as a mum sitting down and thinking about all the other things that you've got to do. I had a session last week with a coach by the name of Brad Fennell. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. And we unpacked a lot of different things in the 50 minutes of our conversation. But one of the main things that he unpacked that I took away from it was, me talking about, I feel like, every afternoon I need a glass of wine. And I wasn't always like this. I didn't crave wine. I didn't want to drink. I didn't, sometimes at 2:00, I'm like, how early is too early? And you're like, I'm thinking about it, conscious in my mindset. And we unpacked what that signified for me and what that actually, meant for me. And what having a wine means is that my responsibilities, I don't care about them anymore. They're not as important. I'm not worried about the washing. I'm not worried if the house is really untidy. I'm not worried what we have for dinner, because that wine just relaxes me physically. And, that's what alcohol does. It's a relaxant, and it's also a depressant, but that's a whole other issue. And yeah, I really finally understood that's what it does for me. It takes away this need to do more, because I can't just sit even when my stepdaughters and my husband are sitting, example, watching Big Brother, the last season of Big Brother, every night they sit on the lounge and watch it. That I could probably count 5 times where after everything was done, I'd finally sit down to the end of it. And even then I felt uncomfortable to do that unless I had a glass of wine, and then everything was thrown out the window. So it's interesting that, yeah, you touched on that.
And one of the things I really work on with women in particularly is being okay with rest and sitting down, because we don't realize we've internalized this thing of being self-sacrificing all the damn time. Like we've got to be everything for everyone, because it's most likely our mothers were like that. Our mothers did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the chores, all the this, all the that. Now in our lives, we're expected to do that plus work. Like, where's the break for us? Like, where's, and wine and food, I tend to have food now. Food's my thing. The tricky thing with wine and food is it works so well, because what happens is when we're uncomfortable with rest, because we're like, I'm a perfectionist, I've got to go, I'm a high achiever, our central nervous system, all the tingles of like nerves and signals going up and through our brain and body are just hyper, like all the time. And the only way to relax that is either, personal work, which could take months, or the instant wine. Like, because wine will instantly start to calm that central nervous system, which is why you can actually go, oh, okay, maybe I can sit down. But without it, you're like still in this hyper state. Does that make sense?
Totally. A little while ago, I saw a sign, just like one of those meme things that, people get printed. And I think everyone's mum might have a quote somewhere written on their wall, or, the barley things that they get printed and bring back. My mum's got a few of those, but it said, I drink coffee until it's acceptable to drink wine. And I was like, oh, that's me. So I'm revving up my nervous system all day long because I'm so tired. And then I'm calming it down. But using alcohol as that calm, because I'm so wired, so stressed. I need to do everything. Everything needs to be perfect. And now that I'm very self-aware, and I knew that hasn't been healthy, and it hasn't been a healthy habit that I started. It's fairly new. It's only like 12 months that I've been doing this, which is a long time, but I haven't always been like this. I haven't always craved it and wanted it. So noticing that, accepting that, and going, hey, this is not what I want to do anymore. This isn't helping me. It's not supporting me, and it's not serving its purpose to me anymore. How can I change that? But I think that will integrate to what we're going to talk about shortly, which is the burnout conversation. So I want to break this episode down into two parts, because you and I discussed a range of different really important topics, and they're all very relevant. And I thought I would let my community on Instagram decide what we talked about. And I was inundated with yeses for everything. We put about 8 things up, but these 2 were the most popular. And that is the 7 kinds of burnout, which we're going to discuss first. So first of all, what are the 7 kinds of burnout? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I thought I'd pull up the post that I put on my Instagram recently, which was the 7 different types of burnout. So I'm just going to go through them and then explain them a little bit more. But there's relationship burnout, parental burnout, social burnout, work burnout, wellness burnout, social media burnout, and just general burnout. And yeah, I guess, did you have any questions around that? Should I break that down a bit more, or?
Yeah, break them, if you can break them down, and every single one, I suppose, and just give everyone listening a really solid understanding of how that would look like for them, or what that would look like for them. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So burnout, it really is when something just makes you exhausted and tired. It's no longer enjoyable, and it just, you can almost viscerally feel it, like I've hit my limit on this thing. So parental burnout, I think we can definitely relate to it. It's literally like I can feel it by 6:30 in the day. I'm really pushing on my parental burnout. My toddler goes to bed at about 7:15, 7:30. And I can feel it at the end of the day when I'm just reaching my limit, particularly when my husband isn't in town, right? And I think a lot of us can feel like, if one more thing happens, I'm done. Like if I have to deal with one more thing, I'm done. It's that real, like, oh, you're just tired, right? So there's that's parental burnout, really just reaching your limits. Like you're with all of these burnouts, think of it like this, like when it makes you act out of character again, that central nervous system sort of being really dysregulated. So when we're hyper,
burnout, that's when we're like angry, like snappy, like super anxious about things, like, oh, did you spill something else? Or like, oh, look at this mess, like real, like, that's hyper. It's when you sort of feel strung out. Then there's hypoarousal, so the other way, where our central nervous system just shuts down. Like, it's been anxious for so long that it runs out of steam, and you're like, I'm done. Do whatever you want to do, say whatever you want to say. I'm like, I'm not even present at this moment anymore. You know, like, you checked out, like, mentally, right in that moment, you checked out. So, excuse me, I have a little bit of a head cold for anybody listening. So given those parameters, yeah, there's parental burnout, there's social burnout. So again, like, for some people, it's, like myself, I'm in a talking profession. It's very easy for me to talk to people all day, then talk to people in the evening, and see my friends on the weekend. Like, you need to have time to be alone. We all need that. We all need different levels of that as well. But even the most extroverted extrovert needs time alone, so we can experience social burnout. And again, it's when you're doing things out of obligation, like, you're seeing that friend because you feel obligated, not because you want to. You're seeing that family member because, oh, that's just what we do, rather than like, do I actually love them? Do they actually mean something to me? Do they actually, help me? Or do they make me feel bad about myself every time I see them? So that's that stuff. Work burnout, really straightforward. Obviously, when you're just working,
Yes.
and it's just, you're sacrificing other parts of your life for work. So you, again, hypo stuff, where it's like you're either anxious and strung out by it, or you've worked so much that you lose energy for everything else. Wellness burnout. So again, something I've been seeing much more in recent years than maybe 10 years ago is this wellness burnout of like, I've got to meditate, I've got to journal, I've got to do my ritual for this, I've got to do my cacao ceremony, I've got to get my workout in. Oh, but I haven't done enough HIIT this week. Oh, but then I need to do like some yoga, like so many wellness tick boxes, right? And it's like, slow down, do one thing well, and then add on top of that, rather than doing all the wellness thing. Got to eat right, exercise, meditate, like, nah. Like,
Well, the biggest smile on my face, because that has been me, and it's a conversation I've had several times on my podcast, being like, I used to feel like I had to do it all in terms of meditate, journal, do this, do that, do my CrossFit, do my stretching, do my, then I feel like I was missing out on something because I don't like going for a walk and I don't like doing Pilates, but everyone else likes it. So maybe I should like it. And being really influenced, because I'm also exposed to this such big high volume of what everyone else is doing on social media, which we didn't have a really long time to go. So that wellness burnout that you've just touched on is new, but it definitely exists, because I felt that overwhelm, that anxiousness, that feeling of failure each day, going to bed being like, again, I didn't tick my boxes, my habit boxes of all these things I should be doing. Now, if I feel drawn to journaling, I will journal. If I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. I paid for the Headspace app. I paid the annual amount because I have intention of using it, but I don't use it every day or every night. I use it when I need it or when I feel drawn to using it. And I'm okay with that now. And really being self-aware with what's working for you and what's not working for you is so important in terms of movement as well, because I know that so many women feel like high intensity, is the only way to lose body fat at the moment. And if you want to lose body fat, then you have to go for runs and you have to be able to do burpees and all these things. And it's like, well, it's not. And if you hate it, then you're never going to lose weight doing it, because you don't actually enjoy doing it. You don't push yourself doing it. You're not, changing any of your habits outside of that because you feel like that's the only thing that's going to support your weight loss journey. Not that this is a conversation about weight loss, but it's just something that came up then, and noticing what works. So do you love going for a morning walk on your own? Do you love not having headphones in your ears? Because I don't, but if you do that,
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's this added pressure for the morning routine, like how in vogue is like, oh, having this morning routine. I'm going to get up at 3:30 in the morning before the sun is up, before my children are up, to do stuff. It's like, are you burnt out? Because you probably needed that sleep. The extra 2 hours that you could have got sleeping would have been far better for you than getting up at 3:30 to get that workout in, to meditate. Like, and are you feeling rushed because you're like, shit, I need to get this done before my husband wakes up, before the kids wakes up, and then I've got a million things to do, and then I've had my coffee. Like, if you did one thing consistently, it would be far better than doing 10 things like all over the place. So if yoga was your thing, you did yoga consistently every single day, or 5 times a week, 3 times a week, whatever, that, think about just that one practice of being present, moving your body, is going to be far better than trying to say, do a run and meditate. Like, you're getting the same 2 benefits, but doing one thing. Same with CrossFit. If you did CrossFit every day and you didn't journal and you didn't meditate, that moment after you work out, like I used to do CrossFit, it's been a long time, but that moment after you've done a WOD and you're like, wow, I really pushed myself.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of myself. Like, that in itself is your internal journaling. Yes, it's not out on a piece of paper, but like, you're reflecting, like, I fucking pushed myself. How good was that? like I'm proud of myself.
Meditation perspective, in that WOD, you switch off, music's pumping, you actually aren't thinking about your to-do list, you're not thinking about what you've done wrong that week, or you're not feeling unsuccessful, you've got no emotions, you are finally able to switch that flick and you're off, but you're also
present.
Yeah. And I love, that's one of the main things that I love about movement for me, but for others, it doesn't look like that. And I think, yeah, it's just so important to really notice how it looks for everyone and do what works for you. And, you know, we're all on this, I think 90% of the population are on this health journey. I could be wrong. That's a pretty big number. I think there's more obesity rates than that, but anyway. And I feel like we're on this holistic health approach, but what are we doing that's getting these results? Because I think we've lost ourselves in the perspective of health is what it looks like, the physical. But how does it make you feel? How does it make you plan for tomorrow? You know, are you setting intentions for tomorrow? Do you wake up joyful? Do you go to bed joyful? That sort of thing. Like, I think we're missing that a little bit.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, it was really, for anybody who knows me, something I personally struggle with has always been body image for myself, you know, and it's something I don't really touch on my own page, because there's areas that I'm a strength with, and there's areas that, you know, aren't my strength, and there may be still a wound there. So for me, body image is still a wound. However, recently I did share a post where, you know, I showed a picture of myself 4 years ago, just before I got pregnant with my son, and I was working out like a bloody maniac, I was full-time work, like training twice a day, and I was always beating myself up, like, why aren't my quads growing enough? Like, why aren't I lean enough that you can see my arm muscles? Like, completely, you know, not that, but I was getting treated so nicely because I was smaller. You know, people were constantly complimenting me on like how good I look and how fit I am and rah, rah, rah. And it's like, my mental health was a hot mess. What are you talking about? But you don't see that. Whereas now I am heavier. I'm not used to seeing, you know, my face so round or a little bit of this double chin. But if you look at holistic health, a biopsychosocial spiritual model that I use, spiritually, I'm much more connected with what are my beliefs and my core values. Psychologically, much better place. Socially, I have much stronger connections, much better boundaries, a great workplace. And physically, yeah, I'm not exercising like a bloody maniac. And yes, my diet's not perfect. But that's just one side of the table, and health looks very different as a mum now, right?
I think social burnout too, which you touched on just before, has a lot to do with social media and being burnt out and exposing ourselves so much to so many different accounts and different people that maybe aren't in our seasons of life. Maybe they were at one point and that's why we started following them. But I think it's important to notice to unfollow accounts that no longer align with you. An example I there's someone I've followed for a really long time, and she's a beautiful person on social media, and she's motivating and empowering, and she's a nice presence there. But I was quite triggered the other day. She put up on her stories about having a 30-minute time. She had a 30-minute meditation. She'd gone for her run. She'd, made this gourmet breakfast. She made her smoothie, and she was just going to sit down and have a coffee before she jumped on her day of work, working from home, influencer life sort of thing. And I'm like, I haven't brushed my teeth.
Yeah.
What? Like, who has time for a 30-minute meditation? And I know you make time for what's important, and I get that. But I was triggered by that. And I think noticing how that made me feel, okay, I'm going to not expose myself to that person that no longer really aligns with my season. And there's no hard feelings there. It just doesn't align. So is that something that you've experienced as well?
Well, yeah, that's the last two types, which is a social media burnout and just general burnout, which general burnout, just to quickly summarize, is just when you're generally feeling burnt out with life. You're like, wow, like life is hard right now in lots of areas, and just to clarify as well, we will always sort of have an area that we're killing it. Like maybe we're killing it in the parenting, but again, our relationship's completely suffering. So again, relationship burnout, or maybe we're killing it in the wellness sphere, but work, our workplace is horrible. So just know that you can't sort of have no burnout at all. It's just kind of tweaking it here and there, but social media burnout for sure. And I think you would know, as a content creator, as businesses in the 21st century, it's so hard, because my husband is so anti-social media. I've shown him so much research about what it does to the brain. He's like, what the hell? And I'm like, but the reality is, even I know the dangers of social media and playing this and all of that. And yet, as a business owner, I have no choice. If you're a business owner in 2021, you have to have a social media presence. And it can be hard, because you're seeing like maybe other accounts who are in a similar niche to you, posting every day, posting all these reels, posting all these stories. And you're like, how the heck do you have the time? And then you try to keep up, then you burn yourself out. And then again, as well, it's like the engaging with everyone. And are you doing this from a place that's heartfelt and like, wow, like really sort of genuine? Or are you doing this because of this pressure of like, I've got to do this? Or and I think as you're sort of touching on, it's like being mindful how it makes you feel. There are a lot of times where I do hop on, and within 10 minutes I'm realizing like I'm not in as good of a mood as I was 10 minutes ago before I hopped on. So it's just, again, being present with yourself and going, is this helpful? Something I've done recently that's been really helpful is I have those screen time limits on my phone. So I just can't use my phone between 2 and 4 o'clock, except for text messages or phone calls. Can't use it for anything else, not even emails, nothing. So that's been helpful. And also in Apple phones anyway, you can have those screen time limits around like socials as well. So you can limit, okay, how much do I actually want to spend on socials? And that's been super helpful, because before I set it, and you look at your averages before you set it, you're like, oh my gosh, I did not know I was spending that much time on there. So that's been really helpful.
This weekend, actually, only on Saturday, and everything that you've just said on social media burnout, I feel like I'm experiencing that, and I might be right in the thick of that right now. I'm going through something where last week I just was like, I love my podcast and I love the community that I've got on Instagram, and I love connecting with like-minded women, and I love talking to women in my DMs and comments and things. Like, it makes my day to know that, I've met some beautifully like-minded people on the other side of the world, or on the other side of this country, where, we have a similar mission, or we're in the same season and we're both going through it. And I'm like, far out. Like, I wish all you girls lived near me so that we could all be friends and hang out, because you don't have that same community that you do, that I, would have here in my hometown. But I am so drained and exhausted from even being there that I stopped wanting to even show up there. And when I because messages on Instagram, it says seen. So I want to see what someone writes to me, but as soon as it says seen, I feel like I have to reply. And if I don't reply, I'm letting them down. And I don't want them to have their feelings hurt, or to feel like I'm not present for them. So I remember I was sitting there last week, and I was literally like pushing my toddler away and being like, Jessie, just give me a minute. I just have to reply. Like, I have to reply to this. And I was like, whoa, this is not okay. This is not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this for the balance. I'm doing this for my family. I'm doing this so that I can be this stay-at-home mum with my kids in daycare once a week, and that's enough. Like, I can do this, all the other things with them and have that experience. And I'm standing here and I'm pushing this in front of my son. And I'm like, this isn't what I want anymore. But of course, I'm never, I'm not getting off Instagram or anything, but I have made some changes in the last 48 hours. I've done the screen time thing. I've set it to an hour a day, and that's more than enough time on Instagram. I've set the intention where I'm just going to mentally, every morning when I wake up and I'm doing my face in the mirror or I'm cleaning my teeth, just make the intention to be aware. I'm going to be mindful online today. I'm going to show up and to connect. And once I've done those things, then it's time to jump off. I'm not going to do it to scroll, to get creative, to be inspired, because I feel like creativity and inspiration will happen without being on there. And just being, really aware of how it makes you feel. You are so right.
Yeah, exactly. Just being, I think the more we can be present in the moment for everything, the more you will get out of life. Because once you're in touch with your emotions, you'll start to notice, okay, social media makes me feel like shit, but being present with my child, even if it's just for 10 minutes, like seeing them light up because I don't have my phone anywhere in the vicinity, it is not around. Like, you'll start to sort of notice those things of like, what really lights you up, what really brings meaning to me, it's totally all those things. I'm so happy that you've done that for yourself too, because it's a journey. Like, as a business owner, you're trying to create something for good reasons, and yet you have to play in this field where it can get really toxic really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. So just moving on to a question that I do have surrounding burnout. Is there a theme in terms of personality types that are more likely to be burnt out? Would you suggest?
Yeah, perfectionists.
High
Perfectionists, 110%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfectionism, if you've got this trait, you are more likely to burn out because you push yourself.
What does perfectionism really look like? Because when I think of perfectionism, it's like, someone OCD, or someone that has to is pedantic about their home or pedantic about their work. But then I think it also more so relates to the really high achievers and the entrepreneurs and the people chasing success constantly and never finding success. Is that more so what it would look like?
Yeah, perfectionism and again, that high achievement are so intertwined. And perfectionism really is about trying to do the best you can, but at the cost of other things as well. So perfectionism, again, a lot of people think of like the person with the perfectly clean house or something like that. But perfectionism can be, you want to be the best at your work, or like for your example, you're a podcaster. I want to be the best podcaster. I want to have the most listens, the most views, the most whatever it is. And then you keep going and you get rewarded on a societal level. So on a societal level, they go, oh, wow, like she's got this really amazing podcast and she's got like ones coming out every week and this and that. Like I know recently I'm listening to another podcaster who went from sort of weekly or maybe twice a week episodes to daily, and she's getting good results from it. But can you imagine the pressure now? Because it's like she's getting these results and people are engaging and she's growing her community. However, it's like, it's just this constant drive. And I think the thing with perfectionism as well, it's just wanting to be the best, but feeling the pressure of trying to be the best. So whether it's a perfectionist, like you want to have the perfect body, you want to have the perfect house. So maybe it's like you're constantly decorating, maybe not cleaning, but you're like, oh, I need to decorate this corner. Oh, I need to decorate this corner. And like not having people over because the house doesn't look a certain way. It's like you're literally missing out on seeing friends and family that you can connect with because the house doesn't look perfect, or it's not decorated, or the kids have made a mess, It's those things. And what we know about perfectionism is there's lots of different drivers, but some of the drivers, the key ones that we see are like imposter syndrome. So people who just don't feel good enough, that's the core of perfectionism. Like, I have to be perfect because if I'm not, I'm not worthy. So if I don't have the perfect body, if I'm not training hardcore in the gym, getting my body fat to a certain percentage, you won't validate me. You won't think I'm worthy. I'm not worthy enough if I'm 5 kilos heavier than now. Those sorts of things. Or like, I'm not the perfect mum unless my house is perfect. I'm not the perfect mum unless I'm like this, all these sorts of things. That kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It definitely does. And it resonates with me. So I know that listeners, it's definitely going to resonate with my community here. So that's really cool. And I think that, yeah, like it's understanding that there's 7 different ways that can look for each person. I think that's a really positive outcome or takeaway just from this episode. Like, it's not just one thing or one style of burnout. It's several different ways that it can show up for you, and noticing it, accepting it, or, reflecting on it. How am I feeling in all these areas? In which, whether it's mentally reflecting on that or physically putting pen to paper, as you said, it doesn't have to be that, but that can really support you, I suppose, overcoming it. Because I would think that when you're on the verge of burnout, you got these niggles, you can feel them, like something's not connecting, something's not feeling good. So that something's coming. So how can you change it? And there's always ways that you can change it. Any tips on daily practices we can integrate to ensure this doesn't happen?
I think, as much as I'd love to say, yes, it's a daily practice and all of that, it really comes down to doing the work, doing that personal work. Because like I said, these sort of practices where we feel like we have to push ourselves, we can't rest. We don't feel comfortable with rest because we feel like we have to be doing something for someone else. Or, we're driven because often we've received messages from other people that I'm not good enough if I don't do this thing. So maybe if you're a perfectionist about your house and the way it presents, who was it that made you feel like those sorts of appearances matter? And that if they're not perfect, like most of us will have an experience that leads us to behave that way. So same with the body perfection, of like this fear of like, oh my gosh, if I gain 10 kilos, or if I don't lose the post-pregnancy weight enough, like my husband's not going to love me and stuff. Like, who has made you feel like you're not going to be lovable if you're not this way? And on a societal level, we get that. We talk about fatness like it's a character flaw, like being overweight somehow means that you haven't done the work. Like I said, I'm heavier now than I've probably been in a very long time. And yet I've done so much personal work. So, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one there.
Yeah, and that's your reflection of you, because you're beautiful, and the child would know that you're beautiful, and your partner would know that you're beautiful and perfect exactly as you are. But that's your own inner work, I suppose, that is, again, a part of that healing journey, because we've all got, cracks, I suppose, that we need to heal. And noticing that that's who you used to be. You're not that. You don't need to fight to be that version of yourself anymore. This is the new and improved version, and this is exactly who you are and how beautiful and perfect that already is. So accepting where you are now is actually a beautiful place, and it is successful, and you should feel fulfilled by where you are. Because first of all, I know for me, with my inner grievances with body image and things like that, I really had to do some hard fucking work on, I will never be who I was before I had a baby. I will never be that person again. And that comes with my body image, and my physical self will never be that version of it again. And owning this version, and how can I love this version more? So
yeah, and again, that takes work. It's not like I could tell you, oh, Kris, you've got to get through this daily practice that's going to get you to that point. Like, it really is just doing the work, and doing the work can look different for different people. Maybe it's getting Reiki, getting kinesiology, I don't know, seeing a psychologist, seeing a social worker, getting counseling, taking ayahuasca in Peru somewhere when the things open up. Like, whatever your personal work is. I don't like health coaches or professionals who it's like therapy or bust. Like, of course I'm going to think therapy can heal everything, but it's not everyone's cup of tea, right? Like, I've got courses and retreats as well, so I try to like mix it up for people.
Yes,
but
totally.
I do think we all have to find things that work for us. And like I said, even with before, like the daily habits, find one thing that works. So like, if therapy is your thing, be consistent with it. If seeing a kinesiologist or a chiropractor, you feel emotionally really kind of opens things up for you, do that consistently. Sort of not try to do that, see the kinesiologist and then see the therapist once a month and then see this person, like, again, that wellness stuff, like not being consistent with any of it.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I understand for sure. So thank you so much for sharing all of the different styles of burnouts. I think that's been really helpful. But we're going to move on to the second part of this episode, which is the root causes of depression and anxiety. Now, this is quite a big topic. I think we could cover this over a 5-hour period, but we're going to try and nut it out in the next 15, 20 minutes. So just to break it down, in your opinion, in your professional, personal opinion, what are the root causes of these two mental health conditions?
It really is community breakdown. And you might be going, community breakdown? Like, what has that got to do with my, my childhood trauma? What has that got to do with my nutrient deficits? What has that got to do with, a whole bunch of things that do actually contribute? So I'm getting to the root cause, the thing that everything has in common. So we do know things like your attachment with your caregiver plays a huge, caregivers, mother, father, etc., grandparents, plays a huge factor in your childhood of who you become. That we know that for sure. If you experience childhood trauma in any kind of version, whether it's just emotional neglect, most millennials, I can tell you right now, most of us did not have a parent who's like, you know what? It's totally okay to feel angry. It's totally okay to feel sad. We all feel it. Like, if you had that parent, good for you.
Yeah.
But most of us didn't. And so that is a form of emotional neglect, because nobody's teaching us that these emotions are okay, how to manage it. Like, children do not know how to do that. So we know that that contributes later in life too, because you're like, oh shit, emotions, I have to sit with it. No, I'm going to numb it. I'm going to drink from it. I'm going to eat from it. I'm going to run away from it. Like, we just don't learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions. But again, the common thing comes back to community breakdown, which is linked sort of to capitalism, like this big kind of other thing going on. But basically what we know is that in individualistic countries, so there's two types of systems basically. There's individualistic, where it's like me, like it's all about me and my immediate family. So like my husband and my kids, we will fight to the death for us, and it's all about us. Whereas a collectivist community is more about making sure that the community's healthy, the community's safe, the community's happy, and making sure that everyone in that community has all of their needs met. So if you want an example of an individualistic versus a collectivist community, collectivist really is all of those Southeast Asian countries you can think of. So if anyone's ever been to the Philippines or Bali, India, even the Mediterranean, so like big Italian families, big Greek families, all of that sort of stuff, like where they've got second and third cousins who would do anything for you. Like, you could rock up, never even meet them, go into their house and they'll cook for you, like treat you like their own. That's collectivist. Individualistic tends to be what we more have in Australia and places like America and things like that, where it's like, you're related to who? You want to come and see me? Like, what the hell? But what happens with that is that basically what we've gone to is that we live in this competitive society where we have to earn more, work more, have this house, have this. And what we've lost is community support. So if you go back even 100, 200 years, 300 years before sort of the Industrial Revolution, which again, I know you're kind of going, where does this fit with the root causes of stress and anxiety and depression? I'll get there. When you look at how we were from an evolutionary perspective as well, we have always been in tribes. Right up until the Industrial Revolution, we have always been in tribes and communities. So again, that Mediterranean feel. And so if I had a child in this community, I would not be burnt out by having children, because I don't have to work as much And also, I've got aunties, cousins, uncles, so many people I can tap out to. Like, it's that whole a village raises a child. You know, I have people who support me. I'm not expected to cook every single meal. I'm not expected to clean the house by myself. I'm not expected to raise the children by myself. I'm not expected to keep an eye on them every single minute of every single day, because there'll be like 10 other kids they can play with, and they all play in the middle, and the parents sort of congregate, you know. So that is a big part of why we're all strung out, anxious and depressed, because we don't have that community connection. Like you're saying, you probably have a better connection with people overseas and interstate than you do in your own neighborhood, when, you know, that's just the reality. And so of course we're going to feel isolated and alone when shit goes wrong in our relationship. Who do we have to turn to? Like, we don't have anyone right there at that moment who we can, you know, tap out to, or something's happening with the kids or whatever. Like, we just don't have that shared stuff. So that's, and the other part of community stuff, which might be interesting to some people, is we used to have like a commute, like we used to grow our food in a lot better way. So we had much more nutritionally dense food. And like we were talking about before, you know, with the central nervous system, that's in charge of stress, anxiety, and depression. We need certain nutrients and minerals to either boost us up, give us energy when we're feeling low, or calm us down when we're just stressed and anxious. Nowadays, most of us have some sort of nutrient deficiency, and that's because we do farming on such a mass level. But if we had our backyard gardens like we used to, we know that that food is far more nutrient dense and fresher and better for you, and gives you all those nutrients that you need for your central nervous system. So again, if we had communities, if we sort of lived slower, we wouldn't feel stressed, anxious, and depressed like we do now. Our nervous system would not be out of whack like it is now. It's sort of a modern day side effect of living the fast-paced life that we do. So does that all make sense? Does that kind of paint a picture of why it's increasing over time?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I think it's a really interesting way to understand mental health and how that impacts in different ways. I have always really advocated for, before you get diagnosed with a mental health illness, take a look at, you know, your foundations. Let's talk about what you're eating, what you're consuming, what you're exposing yourself to on a social media perspective, how much water you're drinking, what movement are you doing, how much sleep are you getting? And then after we've got, you know, diarised that for a couple of weeks, then let's talk about, hey, yes, you definitely are dealing with some heavy emotions. Let's diagnose you with depression, or let's look at a medication to help you and support you. I think we need to just take a step back and really go backwards to evolution. Like, what were we doing before that was working really well? And it's not that mental health wasn't only misunderstood back then. I definitely think it would have been, you know, that we didn't have prenatal, postpartum depression and all these things, all these terms, or that are now being understood and respected essentially. But we definitely didn't, I don't believe that these mental health illnesses were as prevalent, because we had support from a community basis when we had a baby. We didn't have modern medicine when we were in labor and things like that. And you did just get on with it, but you weren't questioning why you had to get on with it. Now we're always full of questions. We're always asking for more. We're always, it's hard to explain. But I feel like, you know, after you had a baby a gazillion years ago, you just had your baby, and then you had your village that supported you, and you moved on with your day. You know, you didn't go through baby blues and things like that. And I love that all of these conditions are being recognized and respected, and there's help and support for so many people out there now. But I definitely feel like all the other foundations, the sleep, the water, the vegetables, we were consuming on a fundamental level these elements that basically we're not now in the scale of what they were. And I think that's impacted us over time.
Huge. If you look at our DNA and our evolution, how we are meant to live, is be community supported. We are meant to have our friends and family around us supporting us. That might be a nightmare to introverts out there like myself, but that's the reality. Like, we're meant to live far more slow pace than what we do. And again, culturally, like, I think it's if you look culturally at what postpartum looks like for women across the globe, like even in India, all the cooking and cleaning is done by extended family. In the first sort of 3 months after birth, the only thing the mother's meant to do is take care of the baby. That's it. She's not, all the other household duties are taken care of. In Japan, the mother doesn't even, again, first 2 months, no cooking or cleaning or household duties, only taking care of the baby. And this is a traditional thing we've been doing for thousands of years. But what we understand now in brain development and the research, the first 2 months of a child's development, huge, like neurologically huge in terms of, do they see the environment as like a safe place, or is it dangerous? Do they see that relationships are helpful and safe, or is it dangerous? Again, childhood development, those first 5 years play such a big part in how we turn out. So if we had support during those years, imagine how much easier it would be to raise kids like in a happy, healthy environment.
Totally. I mean, like, first time around, it was a little bit different for me as into the terms of the second time around with my 2 kids. And what I really noticed the second time is I was more on top of things, and I was more able, it was easier for me to surrender to that postpartum season. But my village had changed. So I've my circle is smaller. So what came of that is I had a few really, really quality people in my life that were dropping food around and that were taking my son to the park and things like that in that first couple of weeks, which was so valuable in that time, as opposed to the time before, where I had all these people come over the day after he was born, and the house was busy and packed, and it was nonstop for the first few weeks with all these guests and all these things, the people wanting to meet this baby. And then they all just fizzled away, and, no one came over, no one visited, no one called. And it was like, wow, that's, this time was a little bit different because I'd openly shared how important it was that I would like to see people more than the first day after my child's born. Like, help me, the hard part's coming. This isn't the hard part. This is the easy bit. And yeah, it's definitely evolved, over time. But I would definitely resonate with what you said there.
Yeah. So, my hope, whenever I host an event, whenever I do any of my courses, whenever I work with someone one-on-one, what I really try to get them to understand before they chase medication, before they chase a diagnosis, is like, what is going on in your relationships and in your lifestyle? Because I can guarantee, if you're feeling off, and what I mean by off is you're stressed, you're anxious, you're depressed, either you've got something unhealed in your life, like, again, a past childhood trauma, a past like psychological thing going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your lifestyle is off balance, which, again, for most of us, unless you're living in some Mediterranean village where you're picking tomatoes in the morning for your lunch that day and you're having wine and you've got all this support, most of us lifestyles off balance because we're now expected to work and to clean and to cook and to raise children all by ourselves. And also, like, not knowing what's important to you, what your values are, and being present, because when you're present, you can feel when things don't fit, and you can feel when things aren't right. And when you know what's important, it's very easy to make decisions about that aligns with me and who I am, that does not. That aligns with the lifestyle I'm trying to create, that does not. So for most people, it's a mix of the three. They don't know what their values are, what's important. Their lifestyle's off balance, and they've got something unhealed. So for many of us, it's this shortcut culture of like, oh, if I get a diagnosis and I get this magical pill, it's going to make everything go away. And it doesn't. Like, I'm not an advocate for medication. I always think you should go through your GP and all of that. But I always feel like you can work on those things naturally, even for free, right? Like you're saying, there's foundational things like get your sleep right, be hydrated, eat well, get some movement, and get emotional support. You got those things in place, it'd be really hard to feel a lot of the other things. It's going to be a lot less severe. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And looking at support from a natural and holistic perspective, anyone that's going through this right now, what is your biggest tip to take away from this episode and to go, I'm going to change this today? What could people change?
That's such a good question. My automatic thought is go to therapy, honestly, because I know that it just for me personally, not only am I a therapist, but even as a therapist, even knowing all of this stuff about mental health, nothing gives me the perspective I have than when I see my own psychologist or social worker. Like it's hard to see your own life objectively.
Yes.
Because we always have the rose-colored glasses on. Like,
Yeah.
maybe your relationship is the root cause of your anxiety because you just don't want to admit to yourself that it's ending.
Mm.
So psychologists will keep kind of bringing it back, like, so how's your relationship going? Oh yeah, like we haven't had sex in 3 months, but it's fine. And it's like, let's go a bit deep. Like, they make you see the parts of your life that aren't working that you don't want to see because you're like, oh no, but I don't want to be in a divorce. Like, that's not where I want to go. But until you work on your relationship, you're just going to feel anxious, right? So that would be my automatic thought. I always think and it doesn't have to be a therapist, but having someone who can work on you from an objective point of view, I think that can be the biggest and best thing for you.
And sometimes I think it's a really healthy way to have a soundboard that's not someone that is going to be biased, or it's not your partner, because sometimes I've caught myself out with, venting to my partner about things where he's kind of like, do you want my opinion? Do you want a solution? Like, what do you really want from me? And I'm like, no, don't tell me what to do. I'm just talking to you. And he's like, well, like, that's so common in relationships, I think, where, especially for women, when we're in our feminine energy and then you got your masculine energy and they've had a hard, long day at work and they get home and we're venting about our babies and what they did that day. And they're like, is this a real life problem? Whereas for us, it's a big problem. But for them, they're like, whoa, like I just lost all this money on a deal, or I did this and, at work and this person got hurt, or whatever is going on with their day that's massive in terms of the scale. But then we've got all these problems, and it's an unhealthy way to work on yourself and work through these emotions. I think just venting to your partner, and so to have that support, to have that external person that you can go to, a trusted source that you can go to, that nothing is off limits. It's a judgment-free zone. I do agree that it's a really healthy thing. I personally see a kinesiologist, and I've just started doing work with a coach myself, and I've decided that I'm going to make these monthly rituals for me, because I know even if I've got nothing going on and my life is really great and I've got a lot of really amazing things going on right now, I want to work on the stuff that I've suppressed. I want to unpack the things that are hard or that I'm not talking about, because I know that's going to enable me to evolve and grow. So I totally support that as well. And I think therapy, in whatever way it looks like, whether it's, finding a social worker or finding a psychologist or finding a health coach or whatever, whatever's going to work for you and whatever person you connect with, because it sometimes comes back to the person that you're connecting with too. I know that male friends of mine that have gone and seen psychologists, or, I've encouraged them to go and talk about their problems, and they don't connect with that. Usually a bloke wants to talk to a bloke, so they go and see a man, and it's a man that's, got his pen to paper and he's old school and he's, got his systems in place, and they cannot relate or connect with that person. They find it really, really hard to even think about going back to try that again, because there's no connection. So knowing that not one person will resonate with you, not that, if one person's not working, there's another option as well. Go and find someone that you connect with. I think that's healthy too.
100%. And I think, like we said right at the beginning about wellness and wellness practices and daily practices, do what comes natural to you. So when you're feeling down, what do you naturally do? So for men, maybe it is that they just want to be with some blokes. Maybe it is that they want to go camping. Like, maybe for you it's journaling. Maybe for you it's like, oh, I just need to vent. I need to just get this off my mind, get this off my chest. Like, sort of go with your natural rhythms, because again, men's mental health, that's a whole nother topic. But it's like, again, when you look at Indigenous cultures, even, they go back to bush, they go back to the land, they go connect, do what they need to do, come
Mm.
back.
Mm.
Like, get away from your everyday reality. And I did a podcast episode on this, like, that's why we feel so rejuvenated from a holiday. It's not the destination, it's not the food, it's not even the massage. It's that we've been able to step outside of our life. So we need to have those moments where we step outside of our life and go, what's working, what's not, what's, again, at the beginning I mentioned, what sucks my energy, what doesn't. Where is my time going, and is that the best use of my time? Right? Like, it's really connecting with what works for you and what doesn't.
Oh goodness, there has been so much to take away from this conversation, I think, even just for myself personally. So thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge. And I think this is going to be a really empowering episode for a lot of women that are feeling a little bit lost at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And look, for any women who, if you're listening to this and you're feeling stressed or anxious or down, and you're like going, how can I go back traditional living? Or like, what is, like, I don't want to ever invalidate your experience. I personally have struggled with anxiety throughout my life. And again, like I said, part of that is unhealed parts of you. You've got to understand those unhealed parts. But please know that there's people who've gone through what you've gone through and support you, and you will get through this. I promise you can move through this. And it's not a forever thing. Sometimes people think, I've got this label now, it's forever. It doesn't have to be. Please know it doesn't have to be. So, all right, that's all I have to say. So
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Inside Out. I really want to grow in this space and make sure these stories and experiences are heard. If this episode resonated with you, I would love to hear from you. Please leave me a review and hit subscribe to ensure you don't miss our next conversation. Please also join me on Instagram and let me know what you thought about this episode at Inside Out with Kris. I can't wait to share more with you really soon.